Wow, thank you. But the real thanks goes to those who are defending us, right? And that's what we're about here today. When George Washington resigned in 1783, he had a resignation that had a prayer on it. And that prayer in part said, and you may not have seen very many resignations that have prayers as part of the resignation. George Washington was a special man. He said, I now make it my earnest prayer that God would have you in the state over which you preside in His holy protection, that He would incline the hearts of the citizens to entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another, for their fellow citizens of the United States, and particularly for their brethren who had served in the field. Now Washington understood, if we're going to have a nation for very long that he, as leader of the revolution, had procured, we were going to have to remember those who served in the field, our military men and women. And instead of regarding and remembering them, we have an administration who throws them about as if they're inanimate objects. Well, we know they're inanimate objects. We know they have feelings. We know they have disciplined themselves to where their feelings don't take over. They are fighting for us. Now,
come kiss me.
I was in the Army for 4 years, beginning in 1978. I never saw combat.
Can he stand next to Mr. Boyd?
But I keep thinking, in 1979, when the act of war occurred,
that would come out good.
I had seen combat. But those of us at Fort Benning and other places
Did you get the kiss? I got it.
To Iran when we were attacked. My fear is we wouldn't have lost so many thousands since then. But we had a weak president then who didn't understand the military's views. He cut it right and left.
At least I have it on this video.
And then he abused
walking into the video.
Who would have ever dreamed, I certainly didn't, that President Carter would have someone who could one-up him as being the worst president, the worst commander-in-chief in our country's history. But he has. Now, under the Carter era,
I read it all the time.
he pushed forward this notion that we need to be so humane that we never take out the leaders of a foreign country. And we're seeing that in this administration. Look, let's devastate the country, the people in the country that love us by putting these terrible sanctions on them, even though they love us. And let's let the leaders keep developing nukes, keep brutalizing the people, instead of just taking out the people that hate us. I think it's time to have that debate again. Would we be better off when we have a crazy leader at the top of a country who wants to destroy America and participates in terrorism against this country? Would we be better off taking out the leaders who declared war on us or declaring war against the whole country? Now, I think we saw the answer in Afghanistan. What we did there, many people don't remember. But we had less than 500 of our special ops people that went in support of the Afghan people, and they defeated the Taliban. Remember, for so long in Iraq, people would say, now, Afghanistan, that's the way you fight a war. You let the people in the country fight it, and you just help them. Wouldn't that be nice if we remembered that? But instead, after the Taliban were defeated by the Northern Alliance, we put hundreds of thousands of troops, over 100,000 troops in there, and became occupiers. Folks, occupiers don't do that well in that part of the country, that part of the world. They just don't do well. Somebody said, well, you know, Alexander the Great conquered here, and he died on the way out of there. I don't think that's great. We have allies in Afghanistan, the Northern Alliance that fought for us, that buried family and friends when we did. They still are our friends, but they have been thrown under the bus by this administration. I hear people on the other side of the aisle say repeatedly, we need to remember the lesson of Vietnam. Folks, they don't understand the lesson of Vietnam. The lesson of Vietnam was, you don't enter a war unless you intend to win it.
Yeah!
Now some say, well, that was a war you could never win. That's baloney. Talk to Sam Johnson, my colleague from Texas, a hero of mine in Congress. Sam was a POW for 7 years in Hanoi Hilton. About 3.5 of that was in isolation. They were brutalized. But if you remember the scenario, after Nixon tried to go to a peace table in Paris, North Vietnam made a big deal and walked out. So Nixon ordered the carpet bombing of Hanoi and North Vietnam, and after 2 weeks they came running back to the peace table, and we got an agreement because we gave them what they wanted. And Sam said that they were loading buses to leave North Vietnam, leave Hanoi. Most brutal officer said, he was laughing, said, you stupid Americans, don't you know if you had bombed us for 1 more week, we would have had to surrender unconditionally. Friends, the lesson of Vietnam is don't go in unless you're going to give our military everything they need to win, and you're going to give them rules of engagement that allow them to defend themselves, to be on the aggressive, and to take out the enemy and come home. That's the lesson. Now, some of you have seen in the news, somebody with stars on their shoulders saying our former SEALs, our former special ops, our former military, our veterans are doing a terrible disservice to the uniform when they get involved in politics. And I'm telling you, if you served in the military, you understand it is the law and it's the way it should be. You can't criticize your chain of command as long as you're in the military. But it is your obligation, when you know you have a weak commander, when you're out of the military, to step forward and point that out. Any general, any flag officer with stars here who says our veterans have no right to criticize my commander-in-chief. He didn't sell his soul for 30 pieces of silver. That general sold his soul for stars of silver.
Yes, sir.
He needs to remember who, as a commander, he is supposed to protect. Is it his commander-in-chief who's getting our military in Afghanistan killed? Or is it those who serve under him? The last thing you should ever do as a commander, especially a commander-in-chief, is to say, I'm going to put my military in harm's way and make them stay there till 2014, but you have rules of engagement such that you cannot defend yourself. You're going to be a sitting duck, and we'll see who survives the IEDs at the end of the 2-year timeout I'm putting you in to harm's way. Folks, that alone should tell you we have got to have a new commander-in-chief.
Here, here.
And not only a new commander-in-chief, those who have sold out, those under them, for stars on their shoulders, need to go into retirement and say, I'm sorry, as they do. That is the message. Let me close with what we are supposed to do as a nation. And I saw this in Arlington National Cemetery, and it hit me. This is what we are to do as a nation. We were there to honor a guy named Ross McGinnis.
He can't even talk anymore.
20-year-old from Knox, Pennsylvania. I'm from Tyler, Texas. He's not from my district. But Ross was sent to Iraq, got pictures, big old grin. His other guys around him frowning from the heat, sweat. Like we know right today. From basic training, you see Ross smiling. I don't think I ever smiled in basic. Ross is smiling, a great kid. He's a machine gunner on a Humvee going through a community in Iraq. A grenade goes into the bed of the Humvee. 4 guys in the bed. He's the only one elevated who can jump out and save himself. His platoon sergeant from Longview, Texas, told me Ross yelled grenade, looked back down, and saw all 4 of them just crouch in the corner. Ross knew they would all be dead in a few seconds. Instead of jumping out of the Humvee, Ross jumped in. He jumped on the grenade, took it all. As a result, 2 of my constituents are still alive. Now, his dad, I get an email from time to time saying, don't forgive Ross. I won't ever. But there at the funeral, the chaplain did a good job. We saw the 21 gun salute, heard taps, always continued. We stood to go. 3 of those in Iraq that he saved have been able to get back from Iraq. His platoon sergeant came up as we were turning to go, knelt before Ross's remains, his hands on Ross's remains, and bowed in prayer. The 2 others followed him. Folks, that's when I knew that's what we're supposed to do as Americans. We are to thank God for sending those who will defend us, and thank those who defend us for the courage